Welcome back to the Real Texas Radio Podcast, or if you are joining the show for the first time, 1000 welcomes. I am Bronin, your host, and today's show, it's going to be really focusing on Austin, Texas, and the $6.6 billion budget that is proposed and is now in discussion, and all kinds of waste, fraud, and abuse as you can imagine. So I'm going to be talking about that for most of the episode. But first, a couple of quick Dallas updates. The Dallas Morning News, they released an editorial last week. You probably already saw it. I'm on vacation this week, so I had to record a little bit early if I wanted to get some new content out there for you. But the Dallas Morning News, they excoriated the DART CEO search process and the candidate who, I'm recording this on a Friday, the name has not been officially released, but it's all pointing to Nathaniel Ford, and I talked all about this in my previous episode if you want to check that out. But the Dallas Morning News editorial board, they summed it up perfectly, and they just bashed this guy for being a total hack, for his running up credit cards, lavish spending on food and travel. I think he got his wife a hack job that appeared to be a conflict of interest, and he's absent a lot of the job, apparently, where he is now in Jacksonville, Florida. He's already submitted his resignation there, running their transit authority. And, you know, it had me thinking earlier in 2026, when all of these DART member cities were considering pulling out of the system and holding elections. Most of them ended up staying. Everybody did except for Highland Park. But one of the quote-unquote concessions that Dallas had to make, and to me, the whole process ended up being a win for Dallas, because Dallas is going to end up getting back, allegedly, tens of millions, or maybe like $200 million in sales tax from DART over the next decade as a result of the suburbs wrangling those concessions out of DART. But Dallas had to, quote unquote, give up its majority on the DART board. It had most of the votes, over 50%. Now it has 45%, somewhere in there. The DART board president, of course, is a Dallas guy, Randall Bryant, hack with a bow tie. And look at that. If you're worried about Dallas and waning influence with DART, well, they just rammed through. I don't know if it will end up being official, because this guy is getting such bad press, Nat Ford. Rammed through the Dallas preferred candidate, rammed him through. And once again, the suburbs, Farmers Branch and Plano and Cockrell Hill, once again, the suburbs and their representatives were trying to save the taxpayers from financial pain and embarrassment of this particular hack. And Dallas just barreled through, maintained the course, picked another hack spendthrift to lead the agency. So we'll see what happens there. Wanted to mention that. On the City Hall drama, Front Burner, D Magazine, and The Observer here in Dallas, they're reporting that Pioneer Park, which is the cemetery where Dallas's founding fathers lay to rest, it's adjacent to Dallas City Hall. Well, apparently surveyors were spotted out there doing some surveying, I guess. This is according to Front Burner. And the Save City Hall Coalition, Save Dallas City Hall Coalition, they filed a formal 60-day notice of claim against the city of Dallas, warning that any attempt to use the historic Pioneer Cemetery for a new sports arena or convention center expansion would violate state law. So they've put the city on notice. We'll have the opportunity to get back to all that drama next month and in the coming months. But before I dive into the major topic of the day, which is Austin and the huge budget there and the tax increase proposed along with it, if you haven't already, please make sure to like, subscribe, follow, download the Real Texas Radio Podcast. and from wherever you stream. And of course, you can always follow the Real Texas Radio podcast on X at RTR_Bronin, RTR_Bronin. You can check out my columns at bronin.substack.com. Totally free. You can include your email there if you want to get those columns direct to your inbox. All right, let's go ahead and get into it. All right, now, you're listening to the Real Texas Radio Podcast. I'm your host, Bronin, just a fed-up taxpayer bringing you all of your Texas, local, and national news. Okay, I want to talk about a few other items before I get into the big topic of the show, which is going to be Austin, as I mentioned. And I think first, an update on the mayoral race here in Dallas. So Mike Hinojosa, who working on nicknames for all of these people, I think Tax Hike Mike is catching on because of his record as the superintendent of Dallas ISD, pushing very hard for tax increases year after year. He persisted. And now we've got him on the record here. This was Mike Hinojosa on Inside Texas Politics. He was explaining his position on the Dallas City Hall stay or go, abandon, demolish, or repair. This was his answer.
Be clear, do you support investing in the current building or moving on from it so that land can be redeveloped?
If it was my decision, I probably would not do that because the numbers would not invest in the current structure.
So move on from it.
It's not functional. It's not efficient. It's big. It has great history. So we need to figure out how to honor that history. But, I'm less worried about, because the Central Business District will be redeveloped. Between the Convention Center and Dallas ISD and Dallas College, we got some people that are...
So that's the front runner, folks. That is the sole declared candidate as of right now for Dallas mayor. And you know what? He's got to be so bored. He's 70 at least. He's in his 70s. And he retired officially 4 years ago, and so now he's running for mayor. He declares in the middle of July. He shows up at City Hall flanked by basically nobody, no supporters, holding up signs, 12 people or so. And now he has plunged himself into the most divisive debate that is going to be continuing for the foreseeable future, whether or not to abandon Dallas City Hall. You know, wouldn't you maybe want to wait until the beginning of 2027? Hopefully it's decided what happens, and then you don't have to get into the affray and the morass of that debate. But he plunged himself right into it, so I guess that's his decision. He also, I don't have the cut here, and I guess Inside Texas Politics, I guess that airs on Sundays. I just see the clips on social media, so I don't know the schedule. But Hinojosa, he also said that he's a fan of Kim Tolbert, the city manager, and that he is aware of her retirement date. And I'm hearing it's March 2027 that she would be eligible, I guess, for the full retirement benefits, but that he wants to convince Kim Tolbert to stay. Well, there's a lot of assumptions in that. Well, first off, buddy, the mayoral election isn't until November, so she's going to be eligible to retire in March and hang on for more than 6 months just to have a working relationship potentially with you, Michael Hinojosa. I don't know. There's also a rumor, which I don't really know how much credence there is to it, that Kim Tolbert is eyeing a run herself for mayor. Obviously, she'd have to take a huge pay cut. So I have no idea. This is the rumors on social media. I don't know. So just wanted to update you there. Tax hike Mike. Well, some other news. As I predicted, And I'm not great at predictions, but I did feel confident about making this prediction. I think last year, I think in 2025, I made this prediction that property appraisal protests in Dallas County would hit a record level because of the disgraceful property appraisal hikes that have occurred over the last several years. It's gotten out of control. So I predicted that this is something that people pay attention to more, their property tax bill. Or, ideally, when you get a mortgage and, maybe not every single year the mortgage payment drops, but it's not supposed to increase. That's not how it's supposed to work, right? You're supposed to be incrementally moving toward paying off your mortgage. And I know other factors are at play, the insurance costs increasing. That's another headache here in Texas. But a lot of the increase, I was getting mortgage statements increasing year over year because of the property tax rate was increasing. So people pay attention to that, even if you're a Democrat. And we know that tax hike Mike Hinojosa, his position, his record is that he supports huge property tax hikes. And so that is his record. So why would we believe by backing Hinojosa that he would continue the basically symbolic gesture of marginally, incrementally decreasing the property tax rate in Dallas, which results in no difference because of you're getting assaulted on all fronts from the different taxing authorities, the insurance, the utilities, so on and so forth. But are you going to elect somebody whose record is increasing property taxes? And you know what? Something else that I've been thinking about too. It seems like we have potentially the most likelihood of being able to make a difference in our property tax rate here, which you do by filing a protest on your appraisal. That's the biggest difference that you can make as an individual citizen and homeowner. We're hoping for Abbott, finally, governor of Texas, to prioritize property tax reform, real, actual relief. He's been claiming that he was going to do this for years, as we know. We haven't seen it. We're hoping now, if he's reelected to a fourth term, in all likelihood, that he's going to make good on this long promised relief that has not come yet to fruition. So, you know what I've thought about, though? Cory Booker. I mentioned this on the show. This was months ago. Remember months ago, Cory Booker? He announced this bill that would exempt the first, I think, $75,000 of income from I don't know if it was a household or individual or family, married couple, but exempt the first $75,000 of income from property taxes. That was the most normal Democrat proposal that I have seen in years, in probably a generation. And I haven't heard any follow-up on that. I know bills are proposed all the time and amendments are proposed all the time, and they die. And obviously, it seems like one or two bills, they suck up all the oxygen in the Senate chambers on Capitol Hill for the year, which has been the case this year with the SAVE Act, or the Save America, the Voting Act. In any case, I've heard nothing about Cory Booker's bill. I wish he would become the trumpet for that. Just like in Massachusetts, the state auditor, DiZoglio, I can't think of her first name, but her last, Diana DiZoglio. Well, she is the one note for auditing the state legislature, which the electorate in Massachusetts supported by over 70% a couple of years ago. And then now all of the statewide polls, the Attorney General, Andrea Campbell, and the state legislature, they're doing everything they can to prevent it successfully. But Diana DiZoglio, she won't give up. She keeps beating the drum of auditing the legislature. And she has to do it. And I'm sure she's eyeing a run for governor in, higher office, but she's already in statewide auditor office. In any case, Cory Booker, if you know what, why can't he be the normal Democrat? If he wants to distinguish himself from the Democrats who, are going to just be falling over themselves for transgender and every kind of nonsense and our neighbors with uteruses and the foolishness, the social issues. If he wants to distinguish himself and maybe actually get some independence, and that would really help everybody those of us who have jobs and aren't welfare basket cases, decreasingly fewer of us. If the first $75,000 of income was exempt federally, that would be a huge boost for normal people. So I just wanted to say that in Dallas County. Oh, but I went way off on a tangent. I was trying to bring it back home to Dallas.
I like to get along with the weave. I like to,
you like to weave things in.
But when you do the weaves, and you have to be very smart to do weaves. When you do the weave, look at this, just in this one thing. We're talking about little pieces on here, but it comes back home. Yeah. For the right people, for the wrong people, it doesn't come back home, but they end up in the wilderness.
Okay, well, I'm going to try to bring it back home and not out in the wilderness. So, Dallas County, and I tweeted this out at RTR_Bronin, RTR_Bronin, is now reporting a record of appraisal protests. You can't protest your taxes. Well, you can, but they're not going to care at Dallas County. You protest the value of your property. And they have hit 250,000 and counting, which is way up from like 2019. I think it's more than doubled in the last 7 years or so. Great to see, and I'm glad that my prediction is correct on that. And good luck to everybody. Hopefully you've got a decent settlement. You've clawed back a few $100s from these thieves. And, we just have to keep pummeling until hopefully we have a governor who shows some leadership and rescues the public, the homeowners, from having to do this every year. And he's supposed to make it so you only have to do it every 5 years. We shouldn't have to focus this much energy on it, but oh well, that's reality. All right, Fort Worth, quick story. This was actually shocking to me. And, I listened to all different voices about the economy, and I was listening to somebody blathering on about how the United States has actually been in a recession for all of 2026, maybe even partially in 2025. Have you noticed that? Have you noticed that we're in a recession? Well, Fort Worth ISD, which, as you know, is just taken over by the state for failing schools in Fort Worth, and 800 teachers as a result of this state takeover have resigned. This is according to the Dallas Morning News. They filed an open records request. So let me read you a little bit of this story. The promises of a smooth transition under state control are hitting a wall of reality in Fort Worth. A striking new report by the Dallas Morning News reveals that teacher resignations in Fort Worth ISD have surged dramatically since the state-appointed leadership stepped in this past spring. According to public records obtained by the Dallas Morning News, a staggering 797 teachers submitted their resignations in the brief 3-month window following the arrival of the state's leadership team on March 24th. To put that in perspective, that is more resignations in just 3 months than the district saw during the entire previous school year. Wow. Do you know what? When there is a recession, and obviously the last recession we had, no, it wasn't even during the COVID hoax, farce, nonsense scam, which was really a boon for all of the non-working classes and the millionaires and the billionaires, and then anybody with a real job who's not a welfare basket case like myself got screwed. And you got your Biden COVID check, which you just sent right back if you were like me, you just sent it right back when you owed, quote unquote, federal taxes. So if there's a recession, where do people go? They run to the government jobs. They run to the safe paycheck and the bennies. And I know that being a teacher, it is a more difficult job than your run-of-the-mill government job. You can't hide in a cubicle or just go remote and pretend that you're not there because you're hungover or you don't want to be a teacher today. There's typically more eyes on you if you're a classroom teacher. And those central office jobs in a recession where you can hide in a cubicle or at lunch all day or at home, those definitely get more scrutiny. But the classroom teachers, you have to have them. So if we were in a real recession, I don't think that 800 teachers would have resigned from Fort Worth ISD for whatever the typical pay is over there, $65,000 a year, which, some people they laugh at $65,000 a year and think that is not full-time pay, or $60,000 a year. And you know what the median household income is in Dallas County? It's about $78,000. That can include welfare bennies, by the way. And household income implies multiple income streams coming into the house. Two people working. A married couple, for example. The median individual pay in Dallas is significantly below $60,000 per year, by the way. I know Fort Worth, obviously different than Dallas. I didn't pull Fort Worth's median income, but I think I can assume safely it's roughly similar to Dallas. So I just wanted to point that out. You know who else is hiring? Just about every single police force in the country, certainly in the South. Certainly Dallas Police Department is hiring. I think they're taking on firefighters as well. I think DART is hiring bus drivers. So again, when the police forces, when they close their careers page, when they close the job openings, same with DART, same with the teachers, then I will believe maybe that we're in a recession. But if we still have government full-time positions with great benefits and summers off like teachers, then I don't think we're in a recession. Okay, I've been threatening the whole show, but finally we are getting to Austin because the city manager, T.C. Broadnax, he's the former city manager of Dallas. Dallas, of course, is now managed, quote-unquote, managed by his protege, Kimberly Beiser-Tolbert. And T.C. Broadnax has proposed a budget that will increase the overall tax burden, which includes the fees associated with trash collection and other utilities. It will raise an Austin homeowner's overall burden by something like $350 per year, maybe even a little bit more than that. But the property tax rate by itself, Austinites are looking at about $15 per month in a tax hike. And the property tax rate is calculated at X percent of the $100 valuation of a home. So in Austin, the city manager is proposing to raise it to almost 58 cents on the $100 valuation, which, by the way, is still going to be, even if that is approved by the city council, and most of them have no facility for budgeting or being critical of any spending whatsoever, so it probably will be. Well, in Dallas, our property tax rate is almost 70 cents on the $100 valuation, just for comparison. And one of the interesting budget items that is being increased year over year is homelessness solutions and operations. Homelessness, which By the way, for those of you, if you're outside the state of Texas and you're not aware, the county commissioners, every county has a commissioner's court. They're not real judges. Some of them are lawyers, but they're essentially like the mayor and council of the county. In Austin is the seat of Travis County. And the commissioners, they are responsible for homelessness and health care. And homeless people, they are typically classified under health because I'm not sure why. I don't know why. I think a lot of them are in better health than a lot of people who are not homeless because they live outside. And in any case, cities are often take the blame, right? Just like in Dallas. When we see homeless people out in the streets of Dallas, we blame the council, we blame the mayor, we blame the city staff, we blame the police. And really the county, and believe me, the county, all of the counties, they're spending money on homelessness too, but the cities are then spending additional money on homelessness, and the federal government is then kicking down to the states and the cities and the counties money for homelessness. And it's a big graft. It's a big grift. And the department in whatever city, it's usually termed the homelessness solutions department, the homelessness solutions and operations. It's not about solutions. If you have a department that's dedicated to homelessness, they're not creating solutions. They are maintaining and growing the homeless population, which is the case absolutely in Austin. The homeless population has exploded in Austin. And over the last 6 or 7 years, Austin has spent at least $1.5 billion through its various entities, state, local, city, county, on homelessness solutions. And yet they're really, evidently, the problem is not solved, evidently. And you know what? I was just listening to another radio show based out of New England that I listen to most days of the week. And the host, he had a guest on, John, I think it's Hinderrocker, who he's a writer for Powerline Blog, which I think is based in Minnesota, but they publish a lot of great pieces. And the guest, he just published a piece that included the stat. Do you know how many people are disabled adults in the United States? Do you know how many? So we've got a population of, what's the population of the U.S.? 340 million. About 1 in 10 of the total population, but I think this is just talking about adults, so obviously the total population of the country includes children. 37 million disabled Americans. 37 million. And the writer, he ascribed that stat to the fact that the benefits are very generous from the feds, from the state, and elsewhere. And look, I'm not picking on people who have a disability, right? We all have family and loved ones and friends who are legitimately disabled. They have serious health problems that are not of their making. I'm not picking on people, but I know this is a topic. It cannot be discussed with honesty because it is completely saturated with sensitivity. You're not allowed to have a serious conversation about why the United States, the most advanced country in the world, we have essentially solved, cured, eradicated every major disease that has plagued the human race since the start of time. And the diseases that we haven't been able to fully cure, we can manage, we can rehabilitate people. And for all of the science and advancements that have occurred, the thanks is we've gone out and created new diseases that used to never exist before for ourselves, that are all health related. And I understand that once upon a time, that, not even that long ago, most people did not have a personal vehicle, right? The personal vehicle being responsible for essentially eliminating walking for most people, which walking is one of the defining characteristics of being a bipedal species, right? So you have to walk, but people who walk now, many of them, it's a conscious effort. It's not because they don't have a car. It's because they go out and they consciously walk for exercise or whatever the case. And in any case, I'm talking about this. I know I'm on a tangent, but it's because the homeless are classified pretty much as disabled. I see a lot of them in wheelchairs. Many of them don't need a wheelchair, but it's a better vessel as opposed to a suitcase with wheels. Those tend to break. Those suitcases are intended for a smooth ground surface, like in the airport. They're not supposed to be dragged all over the decrepit sidewalks of your city. So they get the wheelchair. Some of them need it, some of them don't. But I see a lot of disabled homeless, and I'm not even talking about the mentally disabled homeless, which that's the largest category of homeless.
Only a mentally disabled person could have allowed this to happen to our country.
Yeah, so actually, earlier this week, or I guess it was last week, I'm on vacation this week, so I recorded this podcast a little bit early. Forgive me. So if I'm a few days behind on the news, I know in the Trump era, the news cycle is fast and on fire. But I was doing an errand before work early in the morning. I had to return something. And I see on the corner of one of the thoroughfares in my neighborhood, one of the main drags, which is really a homeless gathering point. I've got many of those in my neighborhood. But there was a huge guy, a whale of a guy, white guy, and he had a dog. And he was docile. He wasn't screaming or crazy or anything like that. And there were a few other people who were in similar physical condition. And that was fine, right? So they're at a bus stop. No intention of getting on the bus, apparently. So then later in the day, I go for a walk. And this is hours later, right on my lunch break. And they're still there. He's still there.
Missing extremities, partial paralysis, complete paralysis, epilepsy, severe intellectual disability, psychiatric disability, and dwarfism all qualify.
And it's ridiculous because, do you know what? If you have a legitimate disability, the most of your federal taxes, right? If you want to look at the pie chart of where your federal taxes go, aside from defense, it's to entitlements. Entitlements. What a word, especially in this era. Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security. And if you are in a wheelchair and if you are legitimately disabled, and of course, the mental health, it now, obviously, for a long time now, it's not new, qualifies you for a disability. But if you are physically disabled, you qualify for the cornucopia of benefits, rental assistance, finding housing or a housing voucher, food stamps, free health care, free transportation, whatever the public transit authority is in your city or state. And so it's ridiculous that you are spending your days at the bus stop when you're not trying to get on the bus. The bus stop, the bench is for people who are waiting for 10 or 15 minutes to get on the bus. It's not your patio. It's not your balcony. That's not what it's for. It's not for you to urinate all over yourself and sleep and live in the bus cabin. That's not why it was put there. And so why am I on this tangent? I'm all around the world. So Austin, last year, or I guess still in the current fiscal year, 2025-26, $10 million on homelessness. This is a piece of the aggregate of the $1.5 billion, billion with a B, that has been spent in Austin. And if you go to Austin, the bums are everywhere. They are everywhere, and they are growing. I don't have the stat up in front of me, but on a recent episode, I pulled up the stat. I think maybe by a third, over a 25% increase in bums over the last few years. And now the city manager wants to raise the property tax rate and add another $20 million in spending on homeless, junkie bum, criminal vagrant, mental patient, ne'er-do-well, recidivist reprobates whose day entails sleeping on public infrastructure or panhandling in medians or outside of the 7-Eleven. And it's ridiculous. And thank God that Austin has a number of citizen watchdogs who they're very vocal on social media, and they do a great job of distilling all of the information for you, for the few people who are paying attention. Because as we know, another stat out of Austin, which is probably most cities in the United States, the United States has a much higher percentage of renters than, say, China. Right? And if you talk to a young person, it's somebody in their 20s, extended to their 30s, maybe even older, in any city, they have no intention of staying in the city. They have no intention. They're renting an apartment now. They have no intention of being in that same apartment in 3 years. They have no idea where they're going to be in 5 years. And therefore, they don't plant roots, and they don't care what their city council is doing. They don't know who their city councilors are, or the mayor, or the county commissioners. They have no idea that their city, particularly if it's in Texas, is managed by a city manager, and they have no idea. And they don't turn out to elections. I know, you've heard me say all of this before, but what is so infuriating is just last year in November, despite, and it was a November election, so that's obviously you're going to have a larger percentage of voters. They're not turning out because they care about the local stuff. Typically, they're turning out for president or a senator, usually something like that, a bigger race. But it just so happened that Austin tried to pass Prop Q, which was going to be $100 million tax increase for homeless, for this incorrigible, useless, feckless, resource-depleting layabout class. And every dollar you put into them, and it's evident everywhere. There isn't a city in the country where this isn't the truth. Every dollar you put into that group is a complete waste, unless the goal is you want more homeless people, because that's the only thing that's happening. And Austin rejected with a landslide vote in November, over 60%, I think it might have been closer to 65% of those who cast a ballot in Austin, it was in opposition to Prop Q, to raise the property tax rate for bums who deserve nothing, who don't pay for anything, who all they do is bleepify the city of Austin, the city of Dallas, the city of Houston, everywhere else they go. They're 3, 4, 5,000, 6,000, whatever fake number they come up with that they tell us how many there are. This cohort creates such outsized nuisance, havoc, bedlam, and maelstrom. And they don't deserve another penny. Not another penny. Especially forget about the hunger. There's no hunger in the United States. Are you kidding me? There's nobody hungry. That's a total fake lie. if you believe anybody is hungry. When your homeless population is obese and they can't even stand up, when you're homeless and you're obese, if that isn't an indicator that hunger has been eradicated in your country, then I don't know what is. Last couple of points here on Austin before I move on to the next topic. But after the landslide loss for Prop Q, which most of the city council supported putting before the voters, wanted to give the voters the opportunity to raise their own property taxes, to give it to people who don't pay for anything ever and deserve nothing except for a free ferry ride to Crack Island. And get the hell out of my face, all of you drug addict bums. And it's not our responsibility to pay for somebody's rehab. And you can't force somebody to get sober. That's the first lesson you learn if you go to an AA meeting or you go to rehab. And guess what? We all have friends and family and loved ones who we respect and care about who have dealt with substance abuse. Many of them, they didn't just report to the corner. They didn't report to the sidewalk or the bus cabin or the light rail station and make themselves a burden. Or they did get themselves cleaned up. But guess what? The decision had to be intrinsic and come from within. So you can't force people to get sober. And that's not what property taxes are supposed to go to support. They're supposed to be for roads and traffic lights and sidewalks and parks. That's what your property taxes are supposed to fund. Police and fire. They're not supposed to be social services and welfare for adult men who've made the choice to become drug addicts. And spare me their whole history, you professional excuse makers. I don't want to hear about it. Speaking of nonprofit grifters who all of these tax dollars are funneled to for homelessness solutions, better aptly described as homeless maintenance and growth, homeless expansion. This is ATX Data, which is a great follow on X. And by the way, you can follow the Real Texas Radio Podcast and Bronin on X at RTR_Bronin, RTR_Bronin. And if you want to see or read more rants about homelessness, I've written a number of columns specific to Dallas at bronin.substack.com, bronin.substack.com. Here is ATX Data. He reported this last week. A bombshell new city audit, the Austin city audit report, is coming out on nonprofit contracts next week. If it found that 76% of nonprofits reviewed were not providing agreed upon services. Again, if you live in a big city in America, if you live in Austin, you live in Dallas, you live in Houston, that's not news to you if you have eyes that function. You look around and see all the bums that the nonprofits are supposed to be solving for us, who are getting money 6 ways from Sunday. We need to shut down city nonprofit funding until we figure out what is going on here. It would be negligent to continue with $90 million nonprofit spending, approximately, in the budget without these issues resolved. $90 million for quote unquote work and services that can't produce results, that cannot show that it's effective. And after that vote, Prop Q, in November in Austin, failed, landslide rejection, the city councilors, many of them who supported it, and the mayor, they came out, they changed their tune. We've listened to the voters. We respect the vote. We've heard you. We're listening. 8 months later, and the city manager, T.C. Brodnack's hack, who you were paying for his lunch every day, his sweet green salad. I don't know if he ended up repaying the sweet green or not. $20 a day you were paying for his salad, in addition to his Hollywood contract, his housing relocation stipend from Dallas, cell phone, car, and then Dallas paid him out a year's worth of salary too out of his existing contract because it was allegedly involuntary. And he conned your stupid hack, feckless city council and mayor into hiring him because he told him he solved homelessness. That's what he put in his cover letter. He solved homelessness in Dallas. Let me go ahead and smack down that whopper of a claim. He didn't. Newsflash, he didn't. They said they were going to listen to you as the voters, as the electorate, as the public, and they heard you loud and clear when you voted no on Prop Q. And now they're just with a sleight of hand. You got the city manager has just slipped in an additional $20 million for bums, for that worthless group of incorrigible, feckless, hapless layabouts that's going to do absolutely nothing toward reducing visibility of homelessness in Austin, by the way. And he is raising the property tax rate, trying to the maximum allowable rate before having to actually go back to the voters and ask for a property tax hike, because he knows that just 8 months ago that it failed. So we need some leadership at the state. Abbott, Governor Greg Abbott, we need you to do something about these out-of-control city managers, city councils, mayors. They're not listening to the voters. We know most people in the city, they don't give a bleep about any of these people. They have no idea what's going on. They're not voting, but the few of us paying attention, and I do have empathy and respect for those who I know in Austin who do care, and you know, they deserve a medal. They deserve an award for doing the work that more citizens should be doing, just by at least show up and vote for a decent candidate. You don't have to run in and speak to the city council if you don't want. At least vote for somebody who's not going to screw you every chance they get. So that's where we are in Austin. I think I'm going to wrap up this segment here. All right. Thank you for tuning in once again to the Real Texas Radio Podcast, listening to your host, Bronin, rant and rave again. Check out my back catalog if you're new to the show. I've got hundreds of episodes if you want to hear more ranting about Texas issues, usually Dallas, but other cities as well. And follow the show on X at RTR_Bronin, RTR_Bronin. I will catch you on the next episode.